Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your moderator, Allison Aubrey, NPR.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've got an anecdote to share, and I'm just sitting here thinking, how can I make it really short so Danny doesn't come out here with her hook? I want to share an aha moment with all of you. I think for a long time I had this kind of technical definition floating around in my head about what organic was, and it went something like this. Well, organic is when you don't use synthetic fertilizers, and organic is when you don't use lots of pesticides. And I hadn't really thought about what organic is as opposed to isn't until one day, a couple of years ago, several years ago, my husband and I spent a day touring the wine country in the Finger Lakes region of New York State, a beautiful area. And we were sitting at a vineyard and overlooking Lake Keuka, enjoying a bottle of Pinot Noir, when over walks the vintner, the winemaker. And we get to chatting, and the conversation turns to health. And at the time, the concept of the French paradox was very popular. This notion that something in red wine was very healthy. Scientists had honed in on something called resveratrol. Well, the winemaker looks over and he says, you see these grapes growing on this slope here. These grapes have some of the highest concentration of resveratrol of any grapes anywhere. And I said, oh, really? Well, tell me why. And he said, well, these grapes are constantly under stress. There's a lot of dew from the river, from the lake. There's a lot of rains. And every time they're trying to fend off the fungus from all the moisture, they have to produce something to protect themselves. He said, I could spray these with a fungicide, but if I don't, then the plant actually creates this compound, resveratrol. So I had this aha moment that the very compound that is protecting the grape from a fungus in our bodies is shown to be an antioxidant and an anti-inflammatory. So I was very excited, as I tend to be when I learn new information, and I turned to my husband and I said, that is really, really, really interesting. Don't you think that's interesting? And he said, yeah, but I think you're really drunk. So my question to my panel is, I own up that I was tipsy, but my question to all of my panelists, to cue this off, is was I onto something? Is that sort of the right way of understanding the concept of organic? So let me quickly introduce Charles Benbrook, right here in the red shirt, is a research consultant who's long been involved in sustainable agriculture. Laura Baccia, to his left, is the CEO and executive director of the Organic Trade Association. Dr. Sylvia Abel Keynes is a ruminant nutritionist, which means animal cow nutritionist with Organic Valley. And Cheyenne Christensen, all the way down at the end, is an organic dairy farmer from Wisconsin. And of course, you've just heard from Carlo. So I'll cue it off to you first. Laura, does this make sense? Did I get the concept of organic right?
For me, it makes great sense. And first of all, thank goodness for the French paradox and the new rules on red wine. But I think, absolutely. And one of the things that's most interesting to me is, from the perspective of organic, it's a maturing in our thinking beyond the original excluded practices to what it is and what are the benefits there. And the standards themselves are so much more than the list of things that you can't apply and you can't give to an animal or you can't put on the crop. And they are practices that actually support these more ecological types of systems. And then to watch the science advance, like Dr. Carlo just walked us through, where we can then see what happens to the food and tie it back to a demonstrated codified practice standard is really amazing. And that's definitely, I think we've turned a corner where we are really ready as an eating public to take in more about what organic is.
Chuck, this concept of the very compound that could protect the plant from something, protecting human health. Give us a sense of we just walked through the recent science, but it's been a long road to sort of get there, to be able to measure these things.
Absolutely, Allison. When I took over as the chief scientist of the Organic Center in 2005, there were 150 or so studies published around the world on differences in the nutrient content of organic food compared to conventional food. And even at that time, resveratrol was one of the plant secondary metabolites that clearly is upregulated, if you will, in certain crops and in especially crops under stress. In fact, in grapes, and the primary source of resveratrol in the diet is grapes, but red apples are another important source. It's not uncommon to see twice or even 3 times the level in an organic production system, because it's that plant secondary metabolite that is dealing with largely the fungal pathogens that are so common. Another important class of potent antioxidants that are very important for our health are the anthocyanins. And these are compounds that mostly fruits produce to protect themselves from the sun. It's like suntan lotion for plants. These are what make a red grape's skin very dark. And again, very, very potent antioxidants. So it's intriguing that the compounds that nature has endowed plants with the ability to produce turn out to be so valuable in promoting and protecting our health against things that could damage us.
And Carla, you just walked us through some of the secondary metabolites that are known to be thought to be nutritionally beneficial to us. It's my understanding that when you mentioned nitrogen, it's my understanding that conventional crops, which are given sort of a steady dose of synthetic fertilizer, can grow quickly, and organic systems, which rely more on crop rotation and composting, there's typically less nitrogen available. Is it the less nitrogen available so quickly? Is that what allows the plant to create these secondary metabolites?
Well, it's an interesting question, because that, whether it is a total nitrogen supplied or the way the nitrogen is supplied during the growth period of the crop, that is a big question. My money is on when you get your nitrogen released slowly via microbes in the soil breaking down the organic matter, you have a completely different dynamic of nitrogen being given to the crop. And this lower secondary metabolite content in conventional crops, I think that comes from whacking all the nitrogen in at the beginning of the season, which you do in a typical field crop. And then the plant thinks, wow, I've got enough nitrogen, so what do I compete for now? And the obvious question is light. That's what they've evolved to. If there's enough nutrients, a plant has to compete for light. There's no point in having, in my opinion, and in the plant's opinion, resistant compounds, because if you don't get any light, you're dead anyway. Yeah? So that's what they evolved to. And from the ecological literature, the people who look at succession in rainforests, that is very clear. Plants giving too much nitrogen, they grow tall. And we see that when we give them nitrogen, one of the effects is the same variety with the same genetics grows taller. If we give them compost, they stay slightly shorter.
So they don't take the time to develop these secondary metabolites, which then could be beneficial compounds in us because they don't have much of a future.
That's right. And so they, apart from what your farmer quite rightly, I mean, you might have been drunk, but he was actually right.
All right. Possibly be drunk and right at the same
these
time.
Compounds,
Thank God.
The plants produce these either as an insurance all the time, or then when something hits them. Yeah. Now the organic crops have that insurance. The insurance bit gets them to a higher level, and then they also produce more of that when they're hit by a fungus. Yeah.
Got it. So moving down here to Cheyenne and to Dr. Sylvia Abel-Kane, who you guys work with cows and with soils. Your cows are grass-fed, is that right, Cheyenne?
Yeah.
Help us make the connection. We've just been talking about the fruits and vegetables here, but with cows eating grass, how does your practice of raising, of producing your milk change the nutrition of the milk?
Well, we're following the same natural concepts on our dairy farm, basically. So instead of trying to push the system, we're trying to promote everything natural within it. We want any beneficial nutrients that will come from that system, from the soil, into the forage that the cows can get. So the whole organic process is a kind of a systems approach where we're looking at all aspects of the whole picture instead of trying to just force or manipulate certain pieces. And on our own farm, we found that the more we've worked with that natural system, the more we've built the soil, added some fertility, added organic matter, fed the soil microbiology, which is ultimately what's feeding our plants in an organic system, that has improved the quality of our forage and ultimately the health of our cows and the quality of our milk. And we've noticed that as the longer we've went on this, And some of the tests we've done, the digestibility of our grasses has improved, the energy levels has improved, the grazing strategies help us to balance the diet for the cow, especially being all grass with no grain. We're trying to get a really, really nice balanced plant to feed the cow the optimum nutrition that she needs.
Thank
How long
you.
have you been at it, Cheyenne? To see those benefits?
We started our farm in '93, converted it towards organic immediately. We got on the Organic Valley truck in '99, and we also stopped feeding grain in that same time period. So we've been off grain for about 18 years and have been kind of perfecting our system ever since.
And Sylvia, for cows that go off grain, moving entirely over to grass feeding, talk a little bit about how that grass diet influences the nutritional composition of the milk.
So it is fascinating to hear the reports about the correlation between the minerals and how that affect the quality of the final products. And it's exactly what we see. The soil, the health of the soil reflects the quality of the grass that the plant eats. So the ability of that plant to grow on mineralized soils give that plant the ability to produce complete protein instead of nitrates. And so that will definitely have an impact in the cow. And the cow has an internal fermentation vat, that's the rumen, and is able to take up these proteins, and through the physiology of the cow, the same quality of the good fats in the grass end up in the milk.
As
So we
Carla
see the
mentioned, higher
whole
levels of
process.
omega-3s.
Exactly. We see an amazing mirror of the quality of the grass in the milk. So qualities in terms of nutritional profile, and also knowing that the cow is the first one benefiting from that. Because if the omega-3s are good for us, they are also good for the cow.
Thank you. So Laura, clearly organic has grown from a small niche to a very large niche, billions and billions of dollars in sales. But because there's been so much talk at this conference about making healthy food available or accessible to all people, low-income people, the price point of organic is something that is a reach for people, for some people. Talk a little bit about the conversations within organic trade, within the organic world about this, or give some examples of where you're starting to see some parity in conventional and organic.
That's a great question. And, I think I'll be honest, I'm not sure you'll ever see parity until the food policy system around organic changes, because there are reasons why cheap food is cheap, and it is because some production costs are not captured in the cost of the food that we all go to the supermarkets to purchase. All that being said, I think we're seeing absolutely increased accessibility to organic. We're seeing a much more diverse, whether or not it be income, ethnicity, age, population choosing organic products. And some interesting things about this. There was a study put out by Dr. Regano from Washington State University looking at the price premium for organic production, 5 continents, many, many years, meta-analysis, and showing that there is a premium there. And I think we all, as people who care about food, need to care about farmers having a livelihood where their children can go to school and they can have good options, and they are not so pressed that they have to make short-term immediate decisions that might not be in the best interest long-term of the health of the herd, whatever it is. But there is a premium point at which if you go below, the system might not make sense for farmers to participate in. And that data suggested that it's somewhere just below 10%. The average premium right now is a lot higher than that. But if you go below that, it might not make sense for farmers. But what we're seeing in terms of accessibility and affordability is there's the price to the farmer, and then there's the whole supply chain and what you find at the store. And because organic is growing up, in the early days, literally to have food in the stores, the organic industry had to have its own distribution systems, its own trucks, its own outlets. And the retailers operated on different margin structures because the products didn't turn as fast. So there's tremendous efficiency in the supply chain, after it leaves what we call the farm gate, after the farmer, that you can help the products be more affordable. And now accessibility is, it's a whole new world in terms of accessibility for organic products, and that makes a huge difference as well.
And Chuck, you mentioned when we were talking before, Earthbound Farms as an example.
Yeah, take bagged and clamshell leafy, organic leafy greens have the highest market share of any segment of organic food. It's up to about 40% of the total bagged and clamshell leafy green supply is organic, and Earthbound Farm has a little over half of that. So their entire production system, from on the farm to the processing plant to distribution, has basically captured the same economies of scale that Walmart has for essentially every product in there. And that's why most Americans in major cities, certainly year-round, can buy organic bagged leafy greens for a 5 to 15% premium. And what we've got to guard against, as Laura said, is as organic product becomes closer to conventional, we can't squeeze the farmer. We've got to lower the cost of that distribution system from after the food leaves the farm. And this is something Organic Valley is absolutely committed to.
I was going to ask Cheyenne, so are there efficiencies of scale in your operation, or is it still difficult? You're having to produce your milk here, somebody has to come pick it up, move it to a processing center. Talk a little bit about the cost and how much of it is outside of the way you run your farm.
Yeah, well, as a small family farm, we have, certainly don't have those efficiencies in a sense because each farm is separate. We've been able to tap into some of that or help with Organic Valley by having the, staff on hand to help the farmers. So we have a nutritionist, and a couple of vets, soil consultant, that farmers can utilize to help us, so we can get some extra information. We have a feed program that can help farmers that are short of feed to link up, save on trucking, or just help them find feed. Those things have helped a lot. And as a farmer, the stability of the pay price is instrumental in supporting our smaller farms and the food system that we ultimately want. And so having a sustainable pay price is incredibly important for any small farmer. And that's been part of the success of our farm, was that grazing has been a huge piece of our operation from the beginning, but having that organic pay price, being paid fairly, and having it be stable has been instrumental in being able to upgrade our farm and make it more efficient for our own family and our operation.
What about in the UK? How much price differentials do you see? And do you have some of these economies of scale as organic farms have gotten bigger, or retailers are being able to use the same distributors for conventional and organically grown produce?
Yeah, most organic is retailed to the multiple retailers in the UK, and that makes it different to the rest of Europe, where you have a lot of independent supply chains, which tend to be shorter. I want to make a point on the cost of organic food, which I think we need to recognize. The organic farmer pays for the quality assurance that shows that he produces something of higher quality than the conventional farmer. So we pay for a certification fee, which goes onto our produce, not onto the conventional farmer's produce. And speaking as an olive farmer, that can hit you very, very hard, especially when you're a small farmer. Our cooperative only accepts olive oil which is completely pesticide residue free. Yeah? That goes beyond the organic standard, but it's essential for us to get into certain markets. That means in order to achieve that, because we all have conventional neighbors, we have to harvest the outer row of trees and not sell it and not process it as organic. That is a massive loss, even if you have a big field like me. But if, as you are in Greece, a small-scale farmer with fields around of a quarter of an acre, then half your trees fall into your quality assurance, and the oil can only be sold as conventional. So we're paying there again. I want to introduce chicken production. The chicken feed based on soya is enormously expensive, and part of the expense is that the organic feed mill has to pay for checking that there is no GM contamination. Yeah? Not the contaminator, the organic feed mill and me as an organic farmer has to pay for that more expensive produce. So unless that is addressed through politics, then we still have to have a substantial component of our premium coming from our higher quality assurance costs.
So
Nothing else.
a lot of costs associated with the rules that you have to comply with.
Yeah.
I think it's not uncommon. Certainly, I've had this experience of talking to farmers at a farmer's market in my neighborhood, and you ask them, "Oh, are you organic?" And no, I'm not organic because I can't afford to take the 3 years to convert, or organic is so bureaucratic, but I use integrated pest management, or I use chemicals sparingly. And I think that as the local movement has grown, that's become more of an acceptable answer to people. But I do think that the Tampa investigation raised some questions about what are you getting when somebody says, oh, it's local. Do you want to weigh into that a little bit, Laura, about, this is really what organic fought for a long time, was to have these rules. Do they benefit you? Do they hurt you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Tampa investigation, for folks who, I can't imagine, there are many of you that didn't read it, but it was about some investigation about claims in restaurants around local and farm source that turned out to have not a lot of substance behind them. I think organic was the original verified farm-to-table claim in the marketplace, still the gold standard. It's the only system that has the rigor of a codified practice standard and a certification third-party audit inspection system globally operating. So it really has set the standard. And there's a cost to that, like Dr. Carlo just said. I'm always a little bit puzzled, honestly, when I hear this from folks at the farmers market, because for many years, I was a small organic market grower as well, and I've had experience with this. And nobody likes paperwork, and I get that. But a lot has happened where right now we have some pretty progressive policies through USDA to support farmers with certification in the United States. We have certification cost share, which reimburses 75% of the cost of certification up to $750, that we're now working with USDA to try to expand to make it available during the transition period for farmers, which is all positive movement. So I think people have to buy in, and people have to understand that there's a benefit to do that, because that's what guarantees to the public that you're following the standards. So, I personally believe, that we shouldn't back off that. That's our advantage in the marketplace, and I think it's well worth it, the extra work.
Got it. Go ahead,
Allison,
Jim.
let me jump in here. Carlo made a statement that is commonly heard in Europe about the fact that organic food is recognized as a premium product, with some added attributes, some greater margins of safety, supporting farming systems that make a concerted effort to build the soil, et cetera, et cetera. This is one of the big differences between where organic is at in the EU versus where it's at in the US. There are EU governments that have government policies striving to attain very high market share for organic production over the next 20 years. It's accepted in much of the EU that organic brands are the premium brands in the marketplace, and that just like you expect to pay more for a Mercedes than a Volkswagen, there's a price attached to that. And I have to say, it's great, many of the things that the USDA has done to help support organic certification and transition, but the biggest problem holding back growth in the organic sector in the United States is the USDA and the policies of the USDA, which state that there are no proven food safety or nutritional benefits of organic food, which this is a policy that really has been in place for 15 years anyway, and it's increasingly out of step with what peer-reviewed, well-accepted science shows, as Carlo went through our three meta-analyses. And so there's a tension, a basic tension in the US between the conventional food system and conventional agriculture and organic. And right now, those two segments of agriculture view each other as competitors. And in many ways, this leads to tension and stress and bad mojo in the policy arena and the marketplace. And what has to happen is The USDA and the food industry has got to embrace organic food as the premium brand because it is, it deserves it. And all of agriculture needs to get behind growing it so that the US doesn't sacrifice this rapidly growing, high-value premium market around the world. Because I assure you, there are many food companies in Europe that are quite pleased to satisfy that market demand. And I predict that in the next 5 years or so, there'll be such significant investment in most of the major food companies that they're going to realize, this is crazy. Why are we cutting down our premium brand when the science shows that it is in fact better for people and better for the environment? So I hope that day comes, because where we stand now in this country, it's not good for conventional agriculture and certainly not good for organic.
So let me just push back a little bit. You used an interesting analogy, Mercedes versus VW, and I can tell you, as someone who owned, one, it wasn't a VW, it was a Honda for 18 years. It got me where I needed to go for 18 years. I do wonder about the future of organic in terms of growing it more. Conventionally grown produce does have vitamins in it and is nutritious. And as your research points out, you can, when you measure and study, you can find some measurable significant differences on these plant compounds as we've just discussed, but it still is true that conventionally grown produce is healthy. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, as the picture broadens out, people who are interested in maximizing health, of course, are going to be interested in these higher levels of phytocompounds. But people who are just getting by just want to be able to buy the healthiest diet at the most affordable price. So do you think the future of organic rests on hitting this health benefit, or do you think that the future of it really is in convincing the food system writ large that this is better for the environment?
Well,
and Sylvia wants to weigh in,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure. As a consumer first, I know that I'm looking for the highest, most dense nutrition that I can get in my food. And so if you want to balance not just the quantity of the food that needs to be raised to feed the world, but to improve the quality, the nutrition of the food, then you will value more the quality than the quantity. And I think we need to pay attention how that affects the whole environment. So yes, I'm looking for good, nutritious food, but at the same time, I want to know how that food was grown, how that system was put in place that when it's harvested, it's actually leaving behind a soil that is not depleted, that is soil that is not damaged, so the next crop is able to grow, and there will be a future for my daughter to see good quality food again. So it is nutrition, but it's also a holistic, sustainable approach
The two
to
things
growing the
feed
food.
each other. To you, they're sort of one and the same. Did you want to weigh in, Cheyenne?
Yeah, well, I would just add that on our farm, we've seen as the pasture quality has improved, organic matters have increased. We're soaking in virtually all water that falls on our farm now. So, when you think about the environmental consequences of runoff and some of the flooding we've had in past years through the Mississippi region, especially Mississippi River, we got to factor things like that in. And if our soil does saturate and we have any water moving, it's clear. We could drink that water. So, think about the environmental aspects of that, compared to the large scale. That, and then on the holistic side, that's all part of the holistic system that we're attaining to.
Another way to think about it, I'm wondering, Laura, is so we have organic on one side, we have conventional on the other side. How has organic and the growth of organic influenced conventional ag at all? I mean, is there something, you hear terms like integrated pest management. I'm not even sure I have much of an idea of what it is other than you're using pesticides as sparingly as possible. But has the growth of organic and the understanding about organic influenced conventional ag?
Yeah, I like to think of it as organic as the tip of the spear or the boat, first boat out in the water, and then there's a wake behind organic, and that's all of agriculture. And I think all of agriculture has been made better by the success of organic in the last 20 years. And I think it can also serve as a model as agriculture in the United States is really struggling with the issue of antibiotics in livestock production. For example, as an industry, we have a many-decade track record of raising healthy livestock animals without antibiotics ever. And so there's a lot to be learned there, and I think there's a lot of improvement in the food system overall that organic represents. It can be done. So organic prohibited a lot of artificial colors and preservatives that now major food companies are taking out of their food. It's always been prohibited. It can be done. You can make a great macaroni and cheese that way. And so it's like showing the rest of food how to do it. I was at a really interesting seed tour with display plots of the latest vegetable seeds in the Central Coast of California, where all the farmers come out and they pick their varieties for the next year. This is like the Salad Bowl, and a great organic seed company featuring the varieties. And I was talking with the plant breeder, and so the way they explained it to me is that for decades they've been breeding in fruits and vegetables for time to harvest and yield, because you can use the chemicals to control the pests. And organic growers have to choose organic when available, and they're putting a lot of new varieties out there that have been bred organically. What they're finding is that the growers that grow both organically and conventionally, or just conventionally, are super interested in these varieties now because they're being bred for disease resistance, and chemicals have become very expensive, and the cost of compliance is high. And if they can have a more well-rounded genetic composition of their seed and save a little bit on chemicals, they will. So for me, that's all victory. I like to see that.
And Carlo, how do you see this organic influencing conventional ag?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say that the reason why I initially went into organic farming is the fact that that is a type of agricultural system that we will still be able to produce reasonably large amounts of food with, when the inputs that conventional farming is completely dependent on, but which are non-renewable and increasingly scarce and increasingly expensive, become unavailable or unaffordable. But coming back to your question, yes, organic farming has influenced the quality assurance schemes of produce production and livestock production in conventional in Europe. There's no question about it. With respect to animal welfare, with respect to pesticide use in produce production. But there's a big distinction. Broad acre crops, we have actually seen an increase in pesticide use, an increase in pesticide residues, because the consumer is not as aware and doesn't ask the questions to the supermarkets as much on the broad acre crops. So you have to see it differentially. We now have more or less every major supermarket subscribing or having their own scheme, quality assurance scheme, saying we want to have no residues of pesticides. They don't achieve it, and quite often the pesticide residues are above the maximum residue limit, but they have the policy and they're looking at how they can achieve that. Obviously, they always link it to whether it's affordable, whether it doesn't increase product costs, and then they make the compromise. But that's a good development still, yeah.
Sure. And Chuck, I'm going to let you weigh in. I want to let you know we're going to start taking questions. So if anybody has one or want to start thinking about it, you can raise your hand. They'll come find you. Chuck, did you want to, both Cheyenne and Chuck look like you want to finish that thought.
Yeah, just one comment on the farm side, the organic side, is that, remember that we're pretty new in the, organic is as old as history, but in the current organic systems that we're following, everything has been geared towards the conventional system for decades. We're basically rediscovering lost knowledge, learning new things through scientific discoveries and advancements. So as we look at even comparisons or what's possible, I don't think we've even scratched the surface on what's possible in organic when you consider that we've got 20 years worth of basically on-farm grassroots research going on, because we've pretty much built this movement on the farms with a few interested helpers and consultants, and it's starting to get some university input and some other help on those levels. But give us 10 more years, 20 more years of refining and building our system, and I think the sky is the limit on what's possible.
Allison, there's a really interesting farm out in Washington State in that incredibly productive Columbia River Basin. It's a Watts Brothers operation. It's 26,000 acres under 180 center pivots. And about 6,000 of the acres are organic and the rest are conventional. And that operation moves acres in and out of organic and conventional as a function of the demand for the marketplace. But as soon as they get a new technique refined in the organic, they move it into the conventional. What's happening in the Pacific Northwest, where organic is very sophisticated and it's very big business, is a lot of growers are reaching the point now where their organic system is the most profitable system, whether it's sold as organic or conventional. And you have, in fact, in the tree fruit industry, farmers that are going 100% organic, even though they can't sell their full crop as organic without flooding the market and eroding their price premium. So I do think, particularly in fresh fruits and vegetables, because that's where the pesticide residue and risk concern is most acute, I think we're going to see in 20 years at least 50% of fruits and vegetables will be grown organic. And I think we'll see a lot of organic production that's actually not sold as organic because the market demand isn't there. So I think that's really good news. And I think once we get up into those larger acreage, there's going to become parity in research and infrastructure investment, and the price premiums will come down.
So you see that, just as Laura was saying, you see that as a victory. Yes. All right, so we'll take a question right here. Yes. Can you please
Hi.
identify yourself and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Tom Clutter with Sustainable Cyclists from Lincoln, Nebraska. And this is for Charles, kind of talking, you touched on the premium of the organic brand. And with GMO labeling and the possibility of increased costs for small producers that aren't certified organic or use conventional methods, how do you see that maybe undermining that premium in the future?
Well, you know, the GMO labeling question and how organic is going to deal with the threat of gene flow, and Carlo is really hoping that Monsanto doesn't come up with a genetically engineered olive tree.
That's quite a
Both
challenge.
Laura and I serve on the USDA AC21 Agricultural Biotechnology Advisory Committee, and we've spent 4 years talking about coexistence between organic, conventional GMO, and conventional non-GMO producers. And so we have a kind of an acute awareness of the challenges in the marketplace and the challenges for growers that are posed by the degree of penetration of GMO. So obviously, today, it's the biggest issue for corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and sugar beets, and canola. But we've got the first GE fruit, the Arctic apple. We've got a GE vegetable, the Monsanto's sweet corn. So genetically engineered technology is starting to move into fruits and vegetables, and I think it's going to be a slow and difficult road because there's so much concern about conventional farmers losing high-value markets in the Pacific Rim and in Europe, where there simply is not hardly any willingness to accept genetically engineered fruits and vegetables. So I think it's we've got a lot of difficult work to do to find a peaceful coexistence between an agricultural landscape that has conventional and organic and GE crops grown in the same area. It's a tough issue.
Thank you. Right over here.
Hi, I'm Rodney from Fairtrade America. So, of course, most farmers are in the Global South. I would bet that most organic farmers are also in the Global South. We work with hundreds of thousands of them. Many are organic. We try to make sure that they're getting better prices for organic crops. But for me personally, after only about 20 years, it seems that that's actually the exception in the marketplace. And I'm concerned, I think a lot of people are concerned that a lot of these farmers who are doing a lot of the hard work, taking risk, that the market is going to kind of push them down before the organic marketplace really catches up and creates a sustainable market for these farmers. So do you think enough is being done to make sure that these organic farmers in the South are going to get prices that'll keep them and their kids on the farm?
That's for you.
Laura.
Oh, well, I mean, that's a great question. can I ask you a question back first, and then we'll go from there? So give me a specific example of commodity. Are you talking coffee? Are you talking outside of coffee?
Sure. So I just came from the Specialty Coffee Conference, world's largest coffee conference down in Atlanta. And so even though organic coffee farmers, like in the fair trade system, get at least an extra 30 cents per pound, that still can make it, we know that it's hard for these dedicated, long-time organic farmers to stay in there and keep producing for the market. And other research shows that this is, it's going to be hard to keep a next generation, not all of the kids, but at least some, to pick up when these farmers retire, so that we'll still have an organic coffee, cacao, sugar supply in the decades to come.
Yeah, so that is such a complicated question, because as significant as organic is in the food system, the weight of every challenge in the food supply sometimes sort of seems to rest on organic, because we do hold ourselves to such a high standard. But I think it's a complicated question. It involves the cost of production and the quality assurance systems. And there is work being done, in the last 5 years to reach some equivalence arrangements between countries to minimize the need for duplicative certification requirements, particularly on commodities to export. To date, those arrangements have happened between northern countries, Canada, the US, the EU, East Asia, in terms of markets with high value for consumers. And I think we're going to see in the next number of years some emphasis on how do we bring countries, the South and small landholders into that same system of harmonizing standards to reduce the burden. But that's just a little piece of the puzzle. I think another piece of the puzzle is around, and Dr. Benbrook and I talk about this a lot. It's a big challenge to help the public understand all the intrinsic values, that there's people behind these commodities that we use every day. And coffee is a huge global commodity. It's the largest globally traded commodity in organic, $5 billion a year coming into the United States in coffee. And so we have to really try to speak with one voice as an industry to communicate those benefits so that the public understands. And you guys in the fair trade movement have done such tremendous work to benefit the coffee producers. So more collaboration there.
Okay, yes, right here.
Name's Adam Diamond with American University. From the comments today, it sounds like you're saying organic is better for the planet, better for human health, but at the same time, you're saying we have to work through this market paradigm. If organic is about transforming agriculture, don't we really need to think about this is the way people should farm and changing the whole regulatory framework that governs how farming happens?
Chuck.
Well, changing the whole regulatory framework is a tall order, indeed, and I think that it's quite different what's going on in the organic sector in terms of growth and investment in fruits and vegetables than in small grains, and then certainly the big row crops, corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, very minor market penetration there. And then animals, it's the animal products where there's really some outrageous premiums. I mean, you can pay twice for organic eggs what you can get conventional eggs for. So these different sectors of agriculture are at different stages of shifting, and they're a different set of barriers, both technology and science and infrastructure, marketing standards and grades that face them all. But one of the reasons that things have progressed more slowly in the U.S. is that some of the negative externalities associated with especially large-scale confinement animal operations, those externalities are not reflected in the price of the end product to the consumer. Whereas in several European countries, governments have taken steps that at least make those costs more visible and hold agriculture accountable for more of them. So right now, the the public has an inaccurate impression, I think, of the true full cost of organic versus the true full cost of conventional. And I think as more independent research is done on some of these externalities, people are going to start to become more interested and be more private investment in these organic alternatives.
And anything else we can learn from the EU or the UK in particular regarding these frameworks?
Ooh, getting a bit out of my comfort zone, but personal opinion, yeah. The answer to your question, I think, is yes, but Chuck thinks it's difficult. Yeah, that's
Okay, way back here. Oh yeah, Cheyenne.
Just, the way we've done it so far is through consumers voting with their dollars. And, we need the continued support. People need to make decisions when they buy, when they purchase, which system they want to support, which options they want to support, and that then helps, eventually brings policies and that along with it. But it seems to be a long road to get the recognition that we need.
I'll add one little thing personally. I completely agree, Cheyenne, with what you said. And sometimes you could get overwhelmed by the enormity of solving the big problem, right? And I'm a baseball fan. That's when I go to small ball. So you have to go for the victories. If you get a single or a double or a walk, sometimes if you just don't get hit by a pitch, you know that's good. That's one more foot in front of the other. So I think not get overwhelmed by it.
Got it, Carla.
I just wanted to say we have several examples in Europe that poorly thought through subsidy structures may not be the right thing to do. Yeah. So if you do support, really think about how you want to do it. Yeah.
Back here in this corner.
So as Dr. Carlo showed us, eating not organic food is potentially toxic for our health. So what is happening to make organic just more inclusive? I was glad that you touched upon the barriers for small farmers of the cost of certification, but what about the consumer and the role that race and power and privilege and class plays into eating organic? What is happening in that realm, and what is being done to make organic more inclusive and accessible?
I think if we could make people process raw foods again at home, the premium wouldn't be an issue anymore. Obviously, you need access to the raw materials, which is a difficulty in certain poor neighborhoods. But if you look at the premium of eating processed foods, I use baby carrots, which you should eat, by the way, as an example. In the UK, they are 7 times the price on a per gram carrot basis than buying a raw carrot, cutting it in pieces or buttons and eating it. Yeah. The premium for buying an organic carrot is 10%. Yeah.
So think about your own shopping habits.
Exactly. That's where you can make it accessible immediately when you consider that people who, at least in the UK, the people who eat most processed foods are the people with the low incomes.
There's, right back here.
Is the mic on? Yeah. So Kari Hammerschlag with Friends of the Earth. So as we all know, demand in the market is way outstripping domestic supply for organic. And you all have kind of talked a bit about the policy issues and but I'd really love to hear. There's a lot of people watching this live, and what are the top 2 or 3 policy issues that you think people should be rallying around in the next couple of years to really grow the organic market the way we need to grow it? Where do you want to see everybody moving in that way?
You mean to expand acreage in organic production?
To expand acreage, domestic acreage, since we're importing a lot of organic food right now, particularly grains. So just would love to hear some priorities.
I'm glad you're asking me about grains, because if you're a stockless cereal producer or maize producer, then the prospect of going into a conversion period without financial backing that makes it more secure is really quite daunting. Yeah? Because that's one of the most difficult systems to develop or work on organically, because you're dependent on a very high premium. Because if you're stockless, you have to do a lot of years of fertility building for a year of crop. Yeah? So if you haven't got a conversion support scheme, then it's virtually impossible to get your pig production, your chicken production going, because you haven't got the feed producers in the system. And that I would say, is probably the one biggest thing you should rally around, because your competitors doing that. Yeah, the US doesn't do it at a government level, but European governments, even the UK government, which is not particularly supportive of organic farming compared to continental Europe, they give conversion support because they know that is the biggest barrier for farmers who want to go there, to doing it.
So we see both in the movement to non-GMO grains and organic grains that there's a number of entities, including the Organic Trade Association, who have active proposals for an organic transition label, an organic transition program that can earn a higher price, not the full organic premium, but perhaps half of it. For example, Clarkston Grain, major Midwestern player in the organic and non-GM grain industry, they are developing their own non-GMO transitional label, and they've made a company decision. They're going to pay half of the premium for non-GMO grain for people in the transition and do it for 3 years. And if they go all the way to organic at the end of those 3 years, then they're going to get that full premium. So some kind of transition scheme or program, either within the private sector or through USDA, is really essential.
Transitional support in dairy? Does it exist? Did you get some, Cheyenne?
Well, Organic Valley has a program where we help transitioning farmers the last either 2 years or 1 year before they become certified. So that's definitely helping farmers in these low prices. Ideally, farmers need to be thinking about transitioning when the prices are higher so that they can ride through those, before the dives hit. But, when the price really goes, that seems to be when a lot of farmers start thinking about it more seriously. But that transition payment, I've talked to some farmers that say that's, really helped them in that final year before they can get on the truck.
Sylvia?
And also, I think it is important to, in order to increase the number of acres to be converted into organics, to provide the support to the farmers. There are many that are just thinking about how much I'm going to be losing in yield. I'm going to be less productive. And giving them confidence that there are techniques out there, that there is a lot of information about how to do it effectively, and that it is profitable. Many people are debating whether we need more science and to have more research. I think we have a lot of information already created. We just need to communicate this effectively and help the farmers be confident about transition. And it is a new paradigm. And many times all you need is just communication, flow of information, and then having partnership, mentors that encourage farmers to get to that higher levels and next step.
Thank you. There's one more question right here. Yes.
Yes, Nancy Roman with the Capital Area Food Bank. Thank you so much for the panel. Excellent. And I really personally support organic with my dollars, with my rhetoric and everything else. But I do want to come back to the equity question, because not just in today's panel, but across the balance of the 2 days, one thing I see or fear is that it might get better and better for the middle class and the wealthy as we improve and do organic. And I get it completely about the premium for the farmer and the farmer's families. But it's not just that at tens of millions of people nationwide and hundreds of thousands that we are feeding personally right here in Washington can't get organic. They can't get vegetables at all, at all, through the access and all of that. So my question just to you all is, how, as we have all these critical conversations about organic and beyond, where we really want to improve the food supply and vote with our dollars, which we should, and I will for my milk, do we not forget this other, and it's half, a big half, that is struggling just to get any fresh food at all, and not have them be left behind eating most of the junk food, most of the refined carbs, and most of the vegetables with chemicals if they're lucky enough to get a vegetable.
Yeah, Laura.
I think, thank you for that. It's so incredibly important. A couple things I think of. On the big scale, what we all need to do is stick together from a policy perspective as we gear up to go into a new farm bill cycle that advocates for organic food and sustainable farming need to stick with the folks who are advocating for access and feeding programs and build those coalitions, learn from each other, and really stick together. I think from the organic side of it, there are certain infrastructures that we need to deconstruct through our policy work that allow for accessibility. For example, the biggest barrier to having not only organic food but more healthy food in schools is schools have lost the ability to cook food. They don't have kitchens in them anymore. They have heat and serve. And so that holds everything back in terms of accessibility. There are barriers out there to the WIC feeding programs and access to organic milk, for example. So I think there's those places like technical things we can work together and then stick together on it, because a tremendous amount of respect for the issues you raise and the work you're doing.
Absolutely. I
You have
think.
30 seconds to wrap up.
All right. Well, I want to thank this panel. It was really excellent. I think we touched on a lot of things. We can't answer these problems, but certainly the fact that we're talking about them and so many people are engaged in talking about them, that's the critical first step. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
A huge thanks to Allison and our panelists. Thank you so much.